Good morning, good morning. Go ahead and grab a seat. How you doing this morning? You awake? Okay, good. Good. Glad that you're here. If you don't know me, my name is Matt, one of the pastors on staff here. Thanks for hanging out with us for an hour of your Super Bowl Sunday. I'm just not excited about the Super Bowl this year. Is it just me? All right, just me. All right, so anyways, it's an excuse to eat unhealthy this afternoon, so I'm excited about that. If you are new to our church, I want to encourage you to stop by our new guest table. It's on the other side of our lobby. You'll see the sign there, and our new guest team would love to just interact with you a little bit, answer any questions that you may have about our church. They're here to serve you in any way that they can. Just two quick things before we jump into the message this morning. First, next Sunday here at the Frederick campus, we're going to have a guest speaker who's going to be live with us, Caleb Coltenbach, who was here a couple of years ago. He's back. He's an author and communicator, travels around the country, in the world, and he's going to be talking about the idea of irresistible grace next week. He does a lot of consulting with local churches as well on topics of faith and leadership and reconciliation and also sexual diversity. And so you're going to get to know his story a little bit next Sunday. God has given him a platform. And he has just natural influence in some of the, I would say, the larger conversations, especially in church culture today. So you don't want to miss out next Sunday. Great Sunday to invite a friend and family member as well. And then on Monday, the 10th, he's going to be over at the Niwot campus, 7 o'clock, and he's going to do a parent seminar. So here's the deal. If you're a middle school or high school parent, I want to encourage you to do everything you can to be at the Niwot campus next or 2 Mondays from now at 7 o'clock. He's going to give a presentation. It's going to be filled with great information that you and I need, okay? There are some conversations happening at the middle school and high school level that I think as parents we can be a little bit more informed and have the right tools and language to help lead our kids correctly. So I'm going to be there. My wife's going to be there. We're there, all right? So we need that, and you need it too. So moms and dads, go be part of that. No registration required. You can just show up, and they will lead you to the right place. The second thing, this Friday, we're going to be having our Night to Shine event. The time is here. Whoa. Look at my boy Seth right down front getting pumped up. Now, here's the thing. This is a prom that we put on over the last 4 years for people in our community with special needs, and it is a highlight. This is really the Super Bowl of my year, and we've got 190 guests, over 300 volunteers. Some of the cool things this year, we've had more corporate sponsors than we've ever had before. We were able to pay our whole budget through corporate sponsorship and had so many new sponsors come in, local car dealerships. But this is the cool thing, and I love this. The two largest donors for our event this year were the town of Frederick and the town of Firestone. I love that. I love it. I love how we get to come together and we're just going, hey, we're all in. We have 2 Chick-fil-A's this year that are showing up, catering. We're going to have $6,000 worth of chicken here, okay? And it's going to be amazing, all right? It's very close to heaven. Heaven's going to be very close to that. And it's just, this room's just going to look fantastic. It's going to be a great night. If you're there, if you're volunteering, thanks so much. It's going to change your life. If you're not there, 2 things. 1, get there next year. And 2, be praying for us, all right? Be praying for us. It's a big night, and there's a lot of moving parts, and we so desperately and badly want to put on an event that'll serve our guests well. The biggest thing that you can be praying for is weather, all right? We want great weather that night. Last year, it was freezing cold, and it was snowing, and I saw a snowflake on the weather report yesterday, and I called Satan right out of that, all right? And so not this year, so we're praying for warmer weather, no wind, and that way we can serve our guests the very best that we can. Also, we got 2 tables out in the lobby. This year, we want to give a handwritten note to every guest that we have, but also we want to give a note to every parent and caretaker that's going to be here. We actually have a couple hundred parents and caretakers we serve that night as well, and we give them a free meal, a huge buffet. They have massages and all sorts of stuff going on for them on the other side of the building, but we want to give them a card too, just a card of encouragement. So there's tables out in the lobby. Stop by there, take you 60 seconds. You don't know them, you don't have to. Just say, hey, I'm from Rocky and I love you. I'm so glad you came, and I know that'll mean a lot to them, all right? So there's just ways you can jump in. All right, so we're 2 weeks out. I mean, next week's going to be the last week of our series entitled No Matter What. If you've been with us the last couple of weeks, you know this whole series. The reason why we're talking about this series because we want to hit the values of our church, the non-negotiables of our church. It's the best time of the year to talk about it because it's the beginning of the year. And this year, here's the challenge for you and for me. We want to be committed to the most important values and our most important non-negotiables no matter what. And so we've been deep diving back to the first local church that we read about in the book of Acts, leveraging the teaching of Jesus and how he lived his life to say, hey, this year, 2020, what are the most important things? Of all the things that you could do this year, of all the things that you could be known for, what are the most important? And the reason why we think this is important, the reason why I think you should think this is important is because 2,000 years ago, this movement called the local church started. And they had almost no resources. They had no buildings. They had no Bible. I mean, they had a couple of guys who spent 3 years with Jesus. But here's the thing. They had some values. They valued some things above all else. And they created this movement. It's a very reason why you're here. And they value things at such a high level. In fact, it was such at a high level that the people who wanted nothing to do with God, people who wanted nothing, they didn't even know it was a church, but they just want nothing to do with it, all of a sudden found the first local church irresistible. They're irresistible. And so we've been working through what was it that they value? What did they hold on tight to? And so we started week 1. We said, listen, they had this irresistible pursuit. They spent as much time, being in the presence of God. And so this year we want to give you the challenge. This is the year you spend more time with Jesus, not less. More time with Jesus never hurts. It only helps. And we said, listen, if you don't have a Bible, you got to get a Bible. I've been telling you for 4 weeks, just steal one. All right, just steal a Bible in here. On the way out, we have Bibles on the back. Just grab one. They are for you. Go home. Open up 2/3 of the way through the book of John. Just start reading. 5 minutes a day is going to be better. It will always help. Then week 2, we talked about irresistible community. You've been designed, I've been designed to do life in the context of community. And the reminder was, you're messy. Do you know that? You're messy and I'm messy. But that's not an excuse for us not to do life together. We need each other. We're on the same team. We're one body. And so we need to be for one another. Then Sean talked about this idea of irresistible love, that you've got a love story. God loves you. And if you're a follower of Jesus in here this morning, you know it's changed your life. And now you've been called to share that story of love with the people around you and to do it, and here's my thing I always tag on, without being weird or creepy. Okay, I think you can do it without being weird or creepy, but you got a love story, and you should be sharing that love story. Then we talked about irresistible humility, that Jesus humbled himself. He didn't have to, but he chose to. Considered not to be equal with the Father, but he chose to become a servant. And in the kingdom of God, in his economy, if you want to be first, then Jesus says you got to be last. That your goal in your life isn't to get as many people to serve you, but your goal should be to serve as many people as you can. And then his disciples wrestle with that, and you and I wrestle with that. Remember, we had the ping pong balls up here, and if you were here the second service, my cylinder shattered. You remember that? And so you've got something in your life. And Paul says, listen, the goal of your life is to get your something to become nothing. Your life should just be this outpouring of everything that you have been given. And here we are today. We're going to talk about this idea of irresistible compassion. I want to make the argument this morning, especially if you're a follower of Jesus and if you call yourself a Christian, I want to make the argument that you need to get a passport. All right, that's what I'll argue this morning. You need to get a passport. And we're going to talk about this idea of global outreach, all right? And it all stems from this word compassion. Now, here's the thing. If you would go home this week and if you do a word study specifically in the New Testament and just Google compassion, there are so many verses that we could go to. There are so many New Testament writers that are writing on the idea of compassion. Here's just one of them that I picked out, but there's so many more. But this will get us launched into the idea, all right? Matthew chapter 9, starting in verse 35, and it says this. And Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. Verse 36, and when he saw, now we're going to be keeping tabs on the word saw today, or see, okay? So this is number 1. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. So he saw them, and then he had compassion, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Verse 37, then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers with passports into his harvest field. All right? Send them out. There are people out in the world. There is suffering in the world. Look, and he just says to his guys, look out there. You see it all. Yeah. Listen, the harvest isn't the issue. It's the workers. It's the workers. It's people being willing to go and to get out there and to see. And so you can see compassion is a huge motivator to do what God has called us to do. Now, let me talk about the word compassion just for a sec. So we're on the same page. Working definition of compassion. Here's what I think. Compassion means, I think literally means to suffer with. To suffer with. This is the idea of compassion. I see you and I see your suffering, and now I choose to be with you in your suffering. But just not stopping there, because I think really what you'll see with biblical compassion is not only see you and not only choose to be with you in your suffering, I literally take on your suffering with you, but then I'm going to do something. I see you and I have compassion, but then I do something. This is what separates. This is what should separate really the church from any other world religion. We see you and we see you in your suffering, and so we have compassion, and through our compassion, then we act, then we move, then we go. And the reason why we have to go, and the reason why we have to move, and the reason why we have to do something, because this idea of compassion literally means you see something and it makes you sick to your stomach. That's the idea here. You suffer with them. You see it and you go, that is not right. It should not be like that. That person should not have to live like that. That person should not have to do that. And I can do something. And so I have compassion for them. I choose to live within their suffering with them. And I'm going to do something. I'm just not going to sit there with it. I'm going to do something. It's not empathy. It's compassion. Compassion is moving. It is going. It is active. I just wrote this down. When you read through the New Testament, all right, and every time you see the phrase, and with Jesus or any other character in the New Testament, and it says, Jesus had compassion on them, or so-and-so had compassion on them, just about every time, then they go and do something. He saw him, and he had compassion, so he did something. He saw him, and he had compassion, and he did something. Over and over again, you just see this rhythm. He saw him. He had compassion. And so he did something. Over and over and over again. So here's a story I want to work through a little bit just to encourage us this morning. This is Luke chapter 10. If you've grown up in the church, you've heard this story, don't tune me out. All right, hang with me because we're all getting passports and going on a trip. All right, so here's the thing. Luke chapter 10, there's a story. And again, if you grew up in the church, you know this story. There's this expert in the law. He's like a lawyer. He knows all the religious jargon, knows all the language, and he keeps trying to test Jesus, trying to trick up Jesus a little bit with these complex theological questions about eternal life. And I think the reason why he's asking him because he wants to justify how he's living. He wants to get an excuse of why he does or doesn't have to do certain things in his life. He wants to justify his actions. And he kind of gets to this moment in the conversation when we're talking about what does it really mean to love God and what does it really mean to love people. And so Jesus kind of says, well, you got to love God with everything, heart, soul, strength, mind. You got to love God with everything you have. And then you got to love your neighbor like yourself. You got to love your neighbor. It's really important to love people. And so then this guy will ask Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And what I really think he's saying is, well, who do I have to love and how much do I have to love them? When you talk about neighbor, well, who is my neighbor, and who do I have to love exactly, and how much do I have to love them? How far does my love have to go? And Jesus does what Jesus always does. He goes, I got a story for that, and this is where we get to, all right? Luke chapter 10, and I'm going to start in verse 30. So Jesus replied with a story. Here it is. There was a Jewish man traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. Now, by chance, a priest came along. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked, that means saw to me, that's 3, all right? Looked at him lying there, but guess what he did? He also passed by the other side. Now, in certain versions of the Bible, it'll say the priest and the Levite, but here's what you know. We have 2 characters here. Both are religious leaders. Both have influence within the temple, and for us today, that would be having influence in the local church. So you got to understand the culture here a little bit. And Jesus, he's the greatest storyteller. He knows where he's going. He's starting to create tension with the people that are listening to the story. He goes, listen, we got this guy. He was beaten by these bandits. He's left half dead. And these 2 religion guys come. And guess what? They see him, but they don't touch him. And they walk to the other side. Now, we may hear that and go, that seems a little hypocritical. If these guys are religious leaders, why in the world will they get to the other side? Well, here's why. Because in that culture, for those guys to do what they need to do in the context of the temple, they have to be considered clean. And one of the ways to become unclean is to touch something that is dead. And so they don't want to risk it. The guy's half dead. They don't know if he's dead or alive, but they are so concerned with what they need to do in the context of their religion, they don't even want to get close to this guy. And the people listening would go, yeah, I kind of get that a little bit. And so this is why they're just getting on the other side of the road. Now, what's interesting here, and I think Jesus, too, is bringing a little bit of attention. We talk about the idea of the man, he's walking down from Jerusalem. I bet you the idea that Jesus is saying here is these guys were in Jerusalem, but now they're walking down because Jerusalem's on a hill. So they're actually walking down, going back home, which means this. They've already been to the temple, and they've already done their daily duties. And now they're going home. They showed up to the church service. They did what they needed to do. They sang, they read their Bible, they did whatever, and now they're going down from Jerusalem. They're going back home. They're on their way home for lunch. And Jesus says they saw this guy, and they looked at him, but they didn't do anything. They checked all the religious boxes that morning. They were clean, they got it done, and now they're going home, and they see somebody who is a mess on the side of the road, and they don't want anything to do with them. And he keeps going, verse 33. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw, number 4, the man, he felt what? Compassion. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive and wine and bandaged them, and then he put the man on his own donkey. That's serious, when you put people on your own donkey, all right? Put him on his own donkey, and he took him to the hotel where he took care of him. And the next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, about 2 days' worth of wages, and he told him, I want you to take care of this guy. If he want, give him whatever he wants, and if he runs up the bill, I'll pay for it. Again, Jesus being this incredible storyteller, he's got 2 religious guys. They've got all the excuses of why they don't need to help this guy, and then we've got this good Samaritan. Now, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to know. Samaritans and Jews, who's the half-dead guy's a Jew, they hate each other. And I mean hate each other. They despise each other. The Jews look at the Samaritans like this half-breed. In their culture, the idea is like, if you're a Samaritan, it's like, hey, you just tell the devil I said hello. I mean, these are people who are going to hell. That's kind of in their mindset a little bit. They despise each other. They are not for one another. And Jesus, being Jesus, goes, and this Samaritan guy rolls in. And he sees this half-dead Jew on the side of the road, and guess what he does? He sees him, and he has compassion for him, and he does something. He does something. The good Samaritan sees the hurting man, and he values him more than his schedule. And he values his healing more than his money. Because something inside of him, in his gut, goes, that's not right. And everybody listening would be saying something like this, yeah, but he's a Samaritan. He doesn't have to do that. Those guys hate each other. We get the first 2 guys. I mean, they're the religious guys and clean and unclean and all that. But listen, that guy, he doesn't have to do that. But Jesus goes, no, he saw him and he had compassion. He had something in his gut that said that wasn't right. And so it didn't matter. Didn't matter. Jesus is answering the question of the guy. The guy's going, okay, Jesus, how far does my love have to go? And he goes, your love and compassion has to go as far as a Samaritan serving a Jew. Well, that doesn't even exist in my mind. Jesus goes, I know, but this is where we got to get to. That is compassion, and compassion will move you. Here's what I know, and this is what you got to be okay with this, especially if you're a follower of Jesus. Compassion will disrupt both money and time. Isn't it interesting that the story about compassion, the two main kind of oppositions of not serving, is money and time? Isn't that interesting? Do you know the two biggest excuses of why people do not go on global missions in the context of the local church? You want to take a guess? Money and time. It's too much money and it's too much time. And so here's Jesus goes, I got a story for that. I got a story for that. Hey, Jesus, what are the most important things? Love God, love people. Love your neighbor as yourself. What do you mean love your neighbor? Let me tell you, I got a story about compassion for you. And if you're a Christian, you should be listening because you've heard it on this stage, John 13 and John 15, right? I will know you are my disciples by how you love one another. Hey, Jesus, what do you mean when you say loving people, you love your neighbor as yourself? He goes, I got a story for that. There's this half-beaten Jew on the side of the road, and there were two religious people that just walked right on by. But then there was a Samaritan who saw him and had compassion, actually did something, and he was okay with his time and his money being disrupted. Why? Because he had compassion and he felt something for this man. And if you're a Christian, man, you got to think about this. You got to really think about this, because so many other New Testament writers will fall back to this teaching of Jesus, and they will even take it another step. Look, this is James, the brother of Jesus. Look what he says. This is James chapter 2, starting in verse 14. He says, what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you have faith but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see, number 5, a brother or sister has no food or clothing, and you say goodbye and have a good day, stay warm and eat well. Well, then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, I'm counting it even though it's not really what I'm saying, right? Number 6, so you see, faith by itself isn't enough unless it produces good deeds. It is dead. Dead. That's strong language coming from the brother of Jesus. Knowing the teaching of Jesus, he has heard this story of the Good Samaritan, and he goes, guys, look, you remember that story? Yeah, we remember. Listen, if your faith doesn't move you, if there's no compassion in your faith, then James goes, what good is it? It's dead. It's dead faith. John, one of the originals, guys who was there with Jesus for all of his earthly ministry. He says this, 1 John chapter 3, verse 17. He's going to lean in. If someone has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? Whew. How can God's love be in that person? And oh, by the way, Jesus himself says, I'll know you're my disciple by how you love one another. Do you see the tension here? All of these New Testament writers going, look, if you're just walking by people, if you can just do life and not acknowledge the suffering that is going on around you, and you don't do something, James goes, your faith is dead. John says, I don't even know if you're saved. It's a huge conversation. It's huge. And if you're a follower of Jesus this morning, you got to wrestle with this. You have to wrestle. James and John and Peter and Paul and Jesus will keep leaning in over and over and over again and saying, if you see something, you should have compassion, and your compassion should make you do something. And if you don't, something's wrong. Something's broken. Something that you think is there isn't really there. Jesus keeps going down to verse 36. Essentially looks back at the guy after telling the story of these 3 guys, and he says this, now which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? I would say it like this. Hey, buddy, I hear you. You want to know who your neighbor is and love and all this? Let me ask you, of all three of those stories, who has the best story? Who's got the best story? And friends, the best story will always involve compassion. I'm right. I know I'm right. It is always going to be the story with compassion. Let me give you a couple of stories. And here's the trap that we fall into in the West, and here's the trap. We get so mundane and complacent in our rhythm of our own spirituality, and we're barely fighting for the basics, right? I mean, if we just get here on Sunday morning, if we just put a little bit in the offering plate, and we're just kind of doing, if we're not careful, we'll become complacent within that. Meanwhile, I'm just saying, when you get to the end of your life, those things are all good, but I'm telling you, there's a better story for you than that. There's something better. I've told this story before, but a couple years ago, it's one of my favorite stories here. And here you go. I'm going to lean in now why I think you need to go on a global trip. And if you don't have a passport, I think you should get one, because if you're a follower of Jesus, you should always be ready to go. You should always be ready to go. This is why you need to get a passport, and you need to go. But here's one of my favorite stories. A couple of years ago, 4 years ago, a lady in our church who was an awesome mom. She's invested in our local church. She's an awesome wife. She's got a great family. I love her dearly. But after a service, I was talking about Kenya. She calls me. She goes, I got to go to Kenya, and I don't want to, so thanks a lot. I go, it's not me. That's God. Be upset at him. And so she goes, I got to go. And so she jumps on her team, and about a month before we go, she calls me up. She goes, Matt, I'm freaking out because I don't know what hair accessories to bring. Do I bring my hair dryer? Do I bring my straightener? And I say, here's the thing. Nobody in the slums of Kenya is going to care what your hair looks like, including you. You just don't know it yet because you haven't gone and seen it. And so she goes, and she has an incredible week. She has a great job, is a huge influence with our team, and serves the kids well at the school. And about halfway through our week, she begins to notice that certain girls are not there at school. These 6th and 7th and 8th grade girls are not there. She pulls the principal inside. She goes, hey, I'm just curious where some of these girls are, because to miss school would be a huge deal in that culture. I mean, education is the way out of the slums. And the principal says, Kim, what I think is going on here is that these girls have started their period this week. And when the girls start their period, they just stay at home. And she goes, I don't understand. What do you mean? And he goes, well, they just put out a newspaper, and they squat over the newspaper for the week. It's just what they do. This is what we do. And I'm telling you, in something in that moment, listen, she felt compassion. There was this gut-wrenching thing inside of her. We get back to the hotel that night. She goes, we got to do something. I said, no, you got to do something, all right? You saw it, and so you got to go. And so she came back home, and she says, listen, I got to do something. I'm just not okay with that. And so she started doing all these research, found eventually an organization that has blueprints of how you can sew and create reusable pads and all this kind of stuff. And she opened up sweatshops all through the tri-town, and there's just, like, at some point, I walked into her home one time. I go, this feels unhealthy. All right, this is crazy. But it was happening. And over 18 months, her and a whole lot of people who are part of our church made 600 of these packets. Isn't that cool? 2 years ago, she gets on the plane. We take 15 large duffel bags. We checked in over 90 suitcases that year, and we roll in there, and I got to see that lady get in front of 30 to 50 6th, 7th, and 8th grade girls and change their life. Show them a product they didn't even know existed and said, guess what? You can be on your period, and you can still go to school. And listen, I felt this in the moment. I'm going, what she's saying, what she's doing right now, the reason why this was a big deal, because she went and she saw and she did something. And I just think there's going to be girls in heaven that she doesn't even know right now that are going to point back to that moment and go, that moment was one of the most influential moments of my life. It changed the way I thought. It changed how I live. It was incredible. And I was just thinking, why would somebody halfway around the world come and see me and then actually do something for me on my behalf? You know why? Because we're the church, and followers of Jesus, they go and see, and they have compassion, and they do something. Now listen, this lady was going to be an awesome mom. She's going to have an awesome family. She's going to do it right. I mean, and she'll get to the end of her life, and she can look back. And in the context of our culture, we would all say, you did really well, but I'm going to ask you this morning, which one is the better story? The one with compassion. It's the better story. It's always the better story. We had 3 people from our church last month go and hike Kilimanjaro, over 19,000 feet, on this mission because they want to raise funds, because somebody 2 years ago who was on a trip in Kenya went and saw, and what they saw was 16,000 kids that are in school in the slums, which is a miracle in of itself, but there was no sports program. And they said, that's not right. We have all these kids and no sports program. We should be doing some sports. And so they went on this mission to begin, how do we bring awareness and how do we raise funds to actually buy space in the slums and create soccer fields and create a sports program. And she goes, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start doing these trips and hiking Kilimanjaro, and our team's going to bring awareness, and we're going to raise funds. You know, this last year, 29 people raised over $200,000. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that awesome? Over $200,000. They raised so much money and brought so much attention. There are big boys like Nike who are starting to ask questions, going, what's going on? I think we're well on our way for a huge company to jump in and go, we want to help with that, because we can see it. We see what you see. It's important, and we want to jump in. I go, how does that happen? Why would 29 people hike up Kilimanjaro? I mean, you got to be crazy, and to me, a little bit stupid. But I'm just saying, they're just all in and they're doing it, and the whole time they're doing it, they're not bringing attention necessarily to themselves. They're going, this is why we're doing it, so that we could have the right to tell you a story about, 16,000 kids in the slums. They don't have a playground. They don't have a sports field, and we don't think that's right, so we want to do something about it. And what's going to be cool is that those folks over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years can go back, and what a cool moment when they actually see that soccer field for the first time. It's a better story. It's a better story when you go and you see and you feel compassion and then you do something about it. Jesus says to the guy, what do you think? Who's got the better story? Who got it right? And then verse 37, the man replied, well, the one who showed him mercy. The guy who had compassion. And Jesus said, yep, now go and do the same. Go and do the same. I think this year, this is the year you should get a passport. Get it. Get a passport. And here's why. Because certain people, even this past week, they know I'm teaching about compassion. They said, Matt, how do you develop deeper levels of compassion? How do you grow in your compassion? Here's how you do it. You go and see. You go and see. I love you enough, and I got to tell myself this every single week. Do you know the culture in which we live, and the fact that you probably live in the Tri-Town, or you definitely live in Colorado? I don't think anyone's here who's doesn't live here. The fact that you live here, this isn't really how the world works. You know that. You got to know that. I mean, over more than half of the world lives in less than $2 a day. In 15 years, 33% of the world is going to live in a slum. This is not normal in the context of the world. We are the minority, not the majority. We don't see literally almost what 80% of the world sees every single day. We don't see it. And I think more than anybody else, maybe in the context of the history of the world, we got to be a church that's on the go, going and seeing and going into deeper levels of compassion. And you can do this locally, and I hope you do. I hope you find a neighbor or a coworker or a family member, and you see ways that you can serve and love them, and you have compassion, and you do something. Do it. And I also think you should get a passport and go on a plane and go and see what God is doing around the world, because it's going to be a better story for you in your life. It's been a better story for me into my life. Today, if you want to get really crazy, in 58 minutes from now, nope, that's not right, 48 minutes, I don't know. All right, from now, there's going to be a meeting over at the Niwot campus at 12:30 about the trip to Ecuador. You could leave here, you could go over there, you can show up at that meeting at 12:30, you can get signed up, you can go to Ecuador in June. You can go and see. And I bet you're going to fall into deeper levels of compassion. We're going to Kenya in October again. Some of you need to go and you need to see. And you stop making all these excuses about you don't have time and money, and you just got to get back in Luke chapter 10, and Jesus says, not for me. None of those things are good enough excuses. In fact, there's no excuse. James and John and the rest of the crew go, look, if you don't have compassion and if you're not going, And you got to start asking some really big questions when it comes to your faith. Parents, if you're in the room, listen, parenting is tough. Amen? Anyone going to give amen to that? Oh my gosh. I mean, it's tough, isn't it? You're battling, right? You're battling. Like, listen, if you're a middle school or high school kid in here, you should have compassion for your parents, okay? Because you don't know it. Listen, you don't know it, but we're crying ourselves to sleep most nights, okay? You don't know it. But man, it is tough being a parent, and we question a lot of things, and we so bad want to get it right, and we so oftentimes feel like that we are falling short. I mean, if you want to, listen, if you're in middle school or high school, if you want to get anything that you want, you should go to your parents this week and out of compassion go, hey, I see you, and parenting's really hard. How can I help? What can I do for you? I mean, your mom or dad would be like, just take all my money now. Just go ahead and take it. What do you want? Compassion. Hey, parenting is hard. And listen, middle school, high school kids, you think you know it all, and life's so easy. And guess what? In about 15 years, you're going to be like, it's not that easy, right? Parents, here's the thing. Here's what I'm doing. I mean, people have asked me this over and over again. I've said it, and this year we're living out a little bit. But I want so much more for my girls as they're growing up, more than what this culture is going to offer, more than whatever, the American dream is, more than just, playing it safe, and you get the job, and you get the house, and you get the car, and you just kind of go through the motion. I want them to listen, and I'm not saying anything of that is bad. I just think there's more. There are better stories for my kid. And so this year, my oldest, guess what? I'm bringing her with me to Kenya. She's got to go and see, because here's the thing. She lives a comfy life. She lives a comfy life. She's never wanted for food a day in her life. She's been given everything that she's needed. Her faith has not had to, it wasn't required for just about anything outside of salvation. As her dad, I've been able to provide all of it. She wants a fruit snack, boom, she's got it. She needs to get to school, boom, I drive her. I mean, she wants to sleep in a comfortable bed, I bought it. She wants to be in a house, I got it. Like, her faith hasn't been challenged. But here's the thing. There's something better for her, and I want her to go and see. And here's what I'm hoping, that compassion will begin to rise inside of her and go, oh, guess what? There's something more important than a cell phone or social media or my social status at school. And I go, that's it. Now you're getting it. Because there's kids halfway around the world who have nothing. And Rye, I think you should care about that. I think you should care about that. I think you should think about that. I would love, as your dad, to see that move inside of you and create some action in your life. And I'm not saying I don't want to see her be successful and go to college and have a career, but I'm just saying I also want you to care about the sufferings of the world. And you should go. And you should see, right now she's babysitting galore. She's saving all of her money. She got over $500. Saving money. I've never seen her so excited. Just saving money. Why? Because she wants to go. And she wants to see. And as her dad, I'm praying. And that she'll be filled with compassion. So if you're a parent here's just a little bit of challenge. Why don't you go and see, and then bring your kid to go and see? We can complain all day about this culture and blah, blah, blah. And listen, it's all real. We need to be educated and informed. But I'm telling you, if you go change your kid's perspective, that may be the most influential thing you ever do for your kid. And why not set the pace right now and go and see? All right, I'll end with this. I think sometimes, because we can look around and there is so much suffering in the world, it almost paralyzes you a little bit. I was talking to somebody this morning who said, one of the things that I was holding on to, the reason why I didn't want to go is because I just thought it would be too much, that I wouldn't be able to handle it. And yet the cool thing is that this person went and they saw some things, and I'm telling you, it's changing their life. They're going to be thinking about things and telling stories that for the rest of their life that as they went and they saw. And so here's the thing. You're right. There's an incredible amount of suffering. I remember the first time I walked through the one of the largest slums in the world. I remember thinking, what can I do? What in the world can I do? Just one guy, and look at all this. I mean, this is so much bigger and larger than me. And here it is, friend. Listen, This is a great principle to live by. Maybe you can take this for your year 2020. Here it is. Here's the challenge. I get it. There's a whole lot. But listen, if you choose to do for one what you wish you could do for everyone, that is the way that we begin to see incredible change. Do for one what you wish you could do for all. Because for that one, it'll be life-changing. It'll be life-changing. If you would do for one what you wish you could do for all, listen, I wish I could solve the poverty crisis. I wish I could see people flourish and become educated and get out of the slums of Kenya. But guess what? In my lifetime, when I die, there's probably still going to be a slum in Nairobi. But here's the thing. I know that with my influence and what God has given to me, and I have more money than I need, and I have time and energy, I can at least do something for one. And here's the beautiful thing about the gospel. I believe this to be true, that when Jesus went to the cross, this is crazy to think about, and it may be hard for some of us to grasp, but yes, he had this idea of a love for the world, but I think when he's going to the cross, he's looking right in my face and going, Matt, I'm doing this for you. And I wasn't even born yet. I don't even know anything about God, but God knows everything about me, and he goes, listen, I showed up for you, and I'm going to do something for you. And I came out of compassion for you. And I think Jesus looks right back at his church. And he goes, you remember the cross? Yeah, we remember. You remember the love and the humility and the compassion that I demonstrated to you? We go, yeah, we remember. And he just keeps looking back and he goes, now listen, now you go do it. You go. Well, I don't have any time. And he goes, did you see the cross? Did you see it? Yeah, I saw it. Well, then you go. I don't have anything else to demonstrate to you about what this means to go. You've been given everything. I've indwelled you with my Holy Spirit. You're empowered. You got this. But you got to go. And you got to see. And then you do something. It's better. It's better. And I'm just wondering this year, if this is the year for some of us, that we go in the deeper waters of compassion. Deeper waters. I know the tension of time. I know the tension of money. But friends, when we get to the end of our life, they won't hold up in the economy of God. Because somebody somewhere needs you. They need you. You just don't know it yet. Because you haven't seen them. But when you do, compassion will wreck you. It'll wreck you in the best way possible. In the best way. The better way. The way that Jesus would call you and for me to live. God, what does it mean to love people? What does it mean, to love your neighbor as yourself? Hey. There was a Samaritan and a Jew. And the Samaritan leveraged everything he had for the good of the one that he could have. And maybe even some people listening say, should have hated. And yet compassion moved him to do it different. This is the year we go a little bit deeper. And it will change your life. And here's the beautiful part. God will use you to change others. Let's go do for one what we wish we could do for all. Let me pray for you. Father, this morning, you are good. You are good. And I'm thankful that 2,000 years ago, in great love and humility and compassion, you did for me what I couldn't do for myself. You saw me, and you moved, and you did something that has changed my life. And I pray this morning that we'll be a church that will go and we'll see and we'll do something. That we would hear your voice this morning that says, now you go and do the same. You go and do likewise. You've seen it. You've sang about it. You've heard it. This is the way forward. May this year be the year that we go a little bit deeper as a church. Moved by compassion. Being bold enough to go and to see the most difficult things to see. And in our guts, go, this ain't right. We can do better. We can do more. I want to leverage my time and my energy and my resources for the sake of maybe just one. That we may have a day when we get to spend eternity with you and to see maybe the results of our faith, an active faith, a compassion-filled faith. To see the influence of that. With maybe people we don't even know, go, you don't know this, but my story had a lot to do with your compassion for me, so thanks. Father, we give you the freedom to search our hearts and minds this morning. Let us take a look at how we're managing what you've given to us. May we be a church that lets compassion rise above all else. We love you, and we thank you for Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. And the church said, amen.